H7N9 bird flu spreads to Henan province. Students take to the streets in support of striking dock workers. And John Kerry in Japan for talks on North Korean threats.
Good evening. 11 new cases of H7N9 bird flu were confirmed on the mainland today, including 2 in Henan province for the first time. The total number of infections has gone up to 60, with 13 of those cases resulting in deaths. Locally, the chief executive of the hospital authority says Hong Kong is getting ready for the spread of the virus to the territory. Meanwhile, the Secretary for Food and Health says there's no need to ban live poultry imports from the mainland for the time being. Evelina Leung reports.
Among the latest patients are 2 men in Henan province, which until now was not affected by the H7N9 infections. One of them is a 34-year-old cook who is in critical condition. The other is a 65-year-old farmer whose condition is said to be stable. Health authorities say 19 people who have been in close contact with the 2 men have shown no signs of infection. 4 new cases of H7N9 infection were also confirmed in Zhejiang province. They include a 64-year-old farmer, a 62-year-old retired woman, and 2 men aged 75 and 70. This comes after Beijing confirmed its first H7N9 infection yesterday, a 7-year-old girl who now remains in stable condition.
I think there's no way to predict how it will spread, but it's not surprising if we have new cases in different places.
Locally, Secretary for Food and Health Ko Wing-man says this is worrying.
This is an issue of concern as the evidence now show that or confirm that the H7N9 virus is indeed widely circulating amongst the poultry population.
Ko says most of Hong Kong's live poultry imports are from Guangdong province, an area that hasn't been affected by the virus yet, so there's no need for a ban. But he stressed preventive measures will be stepped up. Chicken vendors we spoke to today also sought to reassure consumers that their chickens are virus-free. They say they clean their cages and stores at least 2 times a day. Even so, Hospital Authority Chief Executive Leung Pak-yin said during an interview with TVB News that the virus may spread to Hong Kong when migratory birds head south in the winter.
If the control measures is not good enough at the mainland, and there will be some mix-up with the human influenza and the avian influenza gene together, there's a possibility there will be human-to-human transmission. But because of the people movement between mainland China and Hong Kong, I think it's quite possible we are going to have some imported cases coming up to Hong Kong.
Leung, however, reassured the public that the territory has enough experience and resources to deal with an outbreak here. Evelina Leung, TVB News.
A group of post-secondary school students have taken to the streets in support of striking dock workers. They're holding a 12-hour slow walk from Central to Container Terminal Number 6 in Kwai Chung. The walk is expected to last till 11 o'clock this evening. Ng Kang reports.
Day 18 of the dock workers' strike. 18 students gathered outside Cheung Kong Center in Central this morning with red ribbons on their foreheads and roses in their hands. One of them sat inside an iron cage, symbolizing the cramped working environment of container terminal crane operators who have to stay inside a small cubicle for long hours every day. Unlike demonstrators in the campaign against the high-speed rail link, organizers of today's event said they will not kneel during the protest action.
We are not going to kneel in this walk. The main reason is that we believe that all of the workers and the students and the participants of this movement is going to stand strong and stand firm to fight against the capitalism, fight against legalism, fight against hate.
Other than students who came here for protests, a group of workers who are on strike also came here to show support. Protesters started their 12-hour walk from Central, passing by Causeway Bay and North Point, where the students took a ferry to Hong Kong to continue their walk to Kwai Chung. Meanwhile, Lee Chuk-yan, General Secretary of the Confederation of Trade Unions, said they did not know when container terminal operator HIT and contractors will resume talks with the workers. We're upset that when we finally managed to open negotiations with the management side, we have to stop in the middle of the talks and let two other labor groups to meet with the management, he said. The Labor Department said the meeting with the other two groups was needed for mediation. Lee said workers represented by one of them, the Federation of Trade Unions, were not on strike and they needed no mediation. But a union under the other labor group, the Federation of Hong Kong and Kowloon Labor Unions, says it's also involved in industrial action, such as issuing statements. Meanwhile, HIT said more workers had gone back to work and port operation had returned to about 86% of the normal level. But that was disputed by the Union of Striking Dock Workers. Liu Kang, TVB News.
America's top diplomat John Kerry is in Japan, the last stop on a whirlwind tour of Asia, which has focused on the crisis on the Korean Peninsula. After meeting top mainland leaders in the capital yesterday, Kerry says Beijing is very serious in wanting to reduce tensions. Tony Sabine reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Japan today, the last stop on his four-day Asian tour aimed at reducing weeks of tensions on the Korean Peninsula. The goal has been to make North Korea think twice about continuing its provocative behavior while reassuring U.S. allies such as South Korea and Japan after threats of war from Pyongyang. North Korea has threatened for weeks to attack the United States and South Korea since new UN sanctions were imposed following a nuclear test in February. There's speculation the belligerent rhetoric is paving the way for a new missile launch or nuclear test to coincide with North Korea's biggest holiday, the Day of the Sun, the birth date of state founder Kim Il-sung. Which is why Kerry's trip also took him to China yesterday, in a bid to get Beijing to rein in its neighbour. And state leaders such as President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang agreed with Kerry that Pyongyang's behaviour was undermining peace and stability in the region. Speaking in Beijing last night, Kerry said it was time to tone down the rhetoric and for cool heads to prevail.
We really want to focus people on the better alternative. And we don't want to get into threat for threat or, some kind of confrontational language here. There's been enough of that.
Kerry's agenda today also included discussions about Tokyo's territorial disputes with China, as well as the future of U.S. bases in Japan. Washington and Tokyo this month announced an accord for the return to Japan of a U.S. airbase there, a step towards resolving an issue that has long troubled relations. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
To Venezuela, where a row between the two presidential candidates vying to replace President Hugo Chavez has broken out on the eve of a special election. The untimely death of Chavez has turned this election into one contentious battle. But that may be settled in less than 24 hours as 19 million Venezuelans head to the polls today to choose their next president.
The Venezuelan opposition leader Enrique Capriles has filed an official complaint against the government, alleging it broke the law by campaigning on state television. Even though formal campaigning came to a close Thursday night on the eve of the presidential election, hours of airtime was afforded acting President Nicolas Maduro. He appeared on TV visiting the tomb of Hugo Chavez. What's more, state TV broadcasts a barrage of programs glorifying Chavez but portraying Capriles as the political heir of the right-wing oligarchy that orchestrated the failed coup against Chavez in 2002. So, Capriles lodged a formal complaint with the Electoral Authority alleging election laws were broken over the government's broadcast of biased political content. While Venezuelans head to the polls today to choose a new leader to complete the 6-year term of President Hugo Chavez, who died of cancer last month, the president of the National Electoral Council maintains the electoral system is ironclad. She says election observers are stationed across the country to monitor the process. And the candidates agree. Both Maduro and Capriles vowed to respect the will of the people by not contesting the results.
During his final campaign push, Maduro told voters a victory for him will continue the political legacy of Hugo Chavez. And even though he lost the last election to Chavez, Capriles campaigned on his humble roots and made promises of reducing poverty and social inclusion. The polls will stay open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., though it could drag on later if long lines of voters are witnessed. Official results are expected by the end of Sunday. Hundreds turned up in London to mark the demise of former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who died on Monday. Many believe she destroyed the social fabric of Britain through her policies of privatization and economic liberalization. But many others also consider her one of Britain's greatest prime ministers, who saved the country from economic ruin. The protest comes as the final details of Thatcher's funeral were unveiled yesterday. The ceremonial funeral with military honors will take place on Wednesday, and police are bracing for possible trouble along the procession route in central London.
Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad has resigned after months of tensions with President Mahmoud Abbas. Officials say the president accepted Fayyad's resignation but asked him to remain as Prime Minister until a replacement is found. The two men have been at odds over economic policy ever since Finance Minister Nabil Kassis quit last month. Fayyad accepted the resignation but was overruled by Abbas, undermining the Prime Minister. Fayyad's resignation is also seen as a blow to U.S. efforts to restart the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. A volcano erupted over the central Mexican state of Puebla, and it's proving troublesome. Affected residents are hurrying to collect the falling ash before it contaminates their water. Commonly known as Popo, the volcano belched out a dense cloud of ash yesterday. The volcanic ash blanketed the grounds in several nearby towns. Because some 25 million people live within a 100-kilometer radius of the volcano, residents have been scooping up the ash before it blows into their water reservoir. Mexico's National Disaster Prevention Center confirmed ash was blown about 400 meters into the air above the volcano. The Popo volcano has been belching ash and vapor almost daily since a round of eruptive activity began in 1994.
In other news, Pope Francis has set up an advisory board of cardinals to help him govern the Catholic Church and reform its troubled administration. The 8 cardinals will help the pontiff put in place changes to correct some of the mistakes made under the previous Pope Benedict. It would look at ways to reform the Vatican's bureaucracy, known as the Curia, which last underwent changes back in 1967. Francis has inherited a church struggling to deal with the fallout over the widespread sexual abuse of minors by priests. And still ahead in our newscast, Occupy Central movement to hold a deliberation day in June. A 24-kilometer run ahead of the June 4th anniversary. And Poland unveils a statue of the late Pope John Paul II.